We'll get going straight away. The format of our Wednesday webinars is that we try to keep them to an hour. We get going reasonably smartly, and we bring NPCPP bring a number of experienced educationalists to parents from an information point of view through our Wednesday webinars. First of all, just to say NPCPP advocated very strongly for a hybrid leaving certificate for this year, but the decision came down otherwise. So we now are running this series of webinars to assist parents and students, of course, who are doing the exams, not the parents. So as parents, we need to be supportive, help our students achieve their best in the exams. But we're running a series of webinars to try and support and prepare for the Leaving Cert as it comes this year. Just ahead of moving into the webinar, I just want to re-emphasize the importance of the time we're in education right now. There are very significant conversations going on about Leaving Certificate and senior cycle reform, particularly. NPCPP is right in the middle of these at the table with all of the other education partners. So because of that, it's critically important that you as parents continue to engage, and we would ask that you encourage all other post-primary parents that you know to engage and register with NPCPP, and also to insist that your school registers the PA with NPCPP and affiliates to National Parents Council post-primary. They are things that bring additional clout from the point of view of being at the table when we are negotiating on behalf of all post-primary parents across the nation. So our format for Wednesday webinars is brief, so we keep it, as I say, to an hour. I will introduce our guest speaker this evening. Are available to parents as a part of the affiliation program. So if your school affiliates, we're happy to bring some of our guest presenters to your parent body in your school. So with no further ado, I want to introduce Arthur Godsil, who is a friend of National Parents Council post-primary. I'm happy to say, and Arthur is one of our guest presenters in our information evenings and offerings that we have through affiliation, as I say. Arthur is highly and broadly experienced in education in Ireland, a headmaster, and now at the core and driving force of Godsil Education, and what you would call an influencer, certainly, in the Irish education scene as he progresses. A good friend of NPCPP with a focus very much on strength-based learning for students. So without further ado, I would like to pass you over to our guest presenter tonight. Thank you all for attending, folks.
Thanks very much, Paul, and thank you for the opportunity for speaking tonight. It's great. I was going to say it's great to see you all here tonight, but of course I can't. It's not quite that same format. But let me just begin by saying that I was asked to speak tonight about the Leaving Certificate, and the very first thing that came up was, is it for parents or for students? But thankfully, it's for both. So a little bit of background on me. I was a former headmaster of St. Anna's College for 23 years, and my contact details are there. So too are the company details. And since 2013, when I left Andrews, I have been director of Godsil Education, where we look after a lot of incoming students in educational guardianship, and we also do a lot of consultancy to schools, individuals, parents, industry, and so on. So that's just the beginning. That's me, and let's look at what we're going to do. First of all, preparing your son and daughter for the Leaving Certificate was the original title. And then I talked to Donal and became preparing parents for the Leaving Certificate. So let's hopefully we can do a mixture of both tonight and go through it. So to overview the actual presentation, I have three areas in this presentation which I'm going to speak about. Firstly, a brief overview of the Leaving Certificate. The reason for this is that it does inform parents and students a little bit about the difficulties or the constraints and the challenges that present in front of some students because of its format and because of the way it's been operating for many, many years. So I'm not going to spend long on that, but it's important that we know that. The second thing I'm going to talk about are changes to this year's Leaving Certificate. And again, it'll be very brief, but the most important part of this presentation is what we can do to help. And that forms the latter part of the presentation, and a very important part of it is. So let's start off with the whole concept of the Leaving Certificate itself. In 2010, the National Association of Principals and Deputy Principals said that the Leaving Certificate was no longer fit for purpose because of its preoccupation with rote learning and fitting place for third level. Now, that actually is a that's not the first time that's been said. It's been said by presidents of universities, it's been said by many teachers and educators, and so on, that it's just not fit for purpose. Now, I know a lot of work has been done to try to change it and to try to bring it more in line with what's required. But it's still a problem. And the problem is that many students find it difficult to handle that. And the reason for that, I would maintain that there's about maybe 20% of students can deal with the Leaving Certificate in a reasonably satisfactory way. Quite a few can't. And so what I hope to do tonight is to try to show you a way around some of the pitfalls of the Leaving Certificate. Now, here's a little question for you all. Here are two images, and Paul has told me he's got a €500 voucher for anybody who can tell me the difference between these two images. Now, I know that I know I can't see you or hear you, but anybody who said there's no difference has got the right answer. Sadly, 924 was the beginning of the Leaving Certificate, and since then, you'll see, the certainly more modern classroom, but both classrooms are set up to deliver content, facts, information to students who are required to remember them and put them back on paper again in the main. And that's the situation the Leaving Certificate has been for many, many years. But society has changed, students have changed, technology has changed, and yet we still hold on to the idea that they need to know stuff, as it were, or things or content in order to get to the next stage. Now, memory is a very important aspect and an important skill, but it's not the only skill. There are many skills that we need for the new world, as it were, that don't involve just memory. They involve things like critical thinking, problem solving, developing of skills, interpersonal interactions. These are the skills that will really make our young people successful in the new world. Now, this is a picture of the first telephone box in 1924. You ask students about that, they wonder what it was and probably suggest that it's somewhere for sheltering from the rain while they're making a mobile phone call. And I'm just showing you this to show you the changes in technology, the changes in our society, and yet the Leaving Certificate hasn't changed. For those those of you who are a few years longer in the tooth, as it were, you may remember what the connection between these two are. Most young people have no idea what they are, but it just shows you how fast we've come. Obviously, those of you who know, you stick the pencil into the winder and you wind the tape back or forward, depending on what you want to listen to. Things have changed so much since then. And information has just continued to blossom, grow, and expand. It has expanded so much that you can see the type of digital universe here, the amount of information that's available out there. And yet we still require students to learn content in the main in the Leaving Certificate. However, the students, they are fighting back. And here's an example of a question, again, a content. Explain what hard water is. This student decided, well, it's ice. Or here, name the quadrilateral. Well, this student put down good names: Bob, Sam, Tennyson, Kate, and Harry, spelled wrong. So the students are beginning to fight back against this ridiculous need to have content as the forefront of all knowledge in the Leaving Certificate. Now, if I move on to the next bit, you'll see here that this year's Leaving Certificate, apparently it's going to be very, very similar in many ways, but in many ways it's not. But the key factor here is that it's going to be We've got many more questions, obviously, and more choice. And this will definitely help students. But it may also cause a problem because if there's less questions to answer, you may need more detail or content within those questions. Either way, it will make a difference, and it will make it easier for students to attack the actual questions and get reasonably good grades as a result of that. But just to let you know, just give you dates there. You probably have these are the dates for the Leaving Certificate, 8th of June to 28th of June, and the oral component in April, just as a dateline for you. Now you can get this on examinations.ie. That's the State Examinations Commission. And there are further adjustments. You can have a look at that. In actual fact, there's 55 subject briefs on this. You can check them out. Now, your teachers should really be assisting the students in this. I know that many schools are doing the mocks at the moment, or finishing up mock examinations. And this is a bit late, really, because do the mocks actually, are they accurate mocks? Because the papers have changed. Hopefully some schools have changed them sufficiently to take into account the changes that are made. Let's hope that's the case. So just to let you know, not to frighten you, but you've got 56 days left for the first examination. They're school days, so let's not get too worried about it. It's not the 4 months or almost 4 months. You take out half term, Patrick's weekend, Easter, public holidays in May and June. You have 56 days left, but let's not panic because I'm coming to a stage here where I'm going to show you some of the things we can actually do to assist. So the first thing is here, what can we do to help? Well, I'm a great believer, as Paul said, in a strengths-based educational journey. Now, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that many schools, and in fact, most schools in this jurisdiction and across the world, are a deficit-based system they work off. In other words, they say, when you're not so good at something, you need more of it. Whereas I would believe that we should resource what students can do rather than what they cannot do. And the reason for that is that it's much more motivating and it works. So to give you a little bit of history of what happened to me, in my last probably 10 years as head of Andrews, I decided to look after the 6 years. And because I was increasingly concerned that the Leaving Certificate was not doing what it should do for many of my students. So I said to I had 4 deputies. So I said to my deputy, I said, look, would you just keep the school running? I'm going to look after 6 years on Thursdays and Fridays. And of course, the school was fine. There was no problems there. So I did the night study on Monday night, Tuesday night, Thursday night and Saturday morning. I would spend a lot of time down the 6-year centre. And then I told the students, if you come to talk to me, I will show you how to do half the amount of work and get twice the effect. Now, that went down very well with the 6 years. I call it a credit card study. I want it now, but I'm not paying for it. So they did. And about 2/3 of the students came to me. And on Thursdays and Fridays, I gave over that time specifically looking after the 6 years. And even after I left Andrews, I've continued to do that to help out students as they navigate a very difficult journey for many of them. So what can we do to help? The first thing we have to think about is we must start focusing on what they can do. Let's not worry too much about the subjects that aren't working. Take the best subject they have and start resourcing that and working with that. They're more motivated for it, they'll enjoy it more, they're more likely to become involved. So a strengths-based model of education is very effective. If you actually research it yourself on the web, you will find thousands of articles about strengths-based philosophy. And certainly it's been transformational from my perspective in educational terms. And I certainly have found nothing in all my years in education that has been as powerful as a strengths-based philosophy. It works every single time for every student that has engaged in it and worked with me on it. And not just me, but the teachers as well. So 6 ways we can help. And I've just put it up as it is sort of an acronym here, MES-EG as in message, but let's have a look at these ones. The first one that I'm going to talk about is motivation. And I'm going to say to you all, it's very hard to motivate students when they are getting results that are not at the top level. They may have spent 6 years getting weak results, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, and that's not motivational. So what a strengths-based philosophy does, it helps to manufacture the H1s or the O1s. It helps them to get to that point so they can actually feel as if I can do this. And it's not done under exam conditions or time conditions. It's done through a process of feedback, which I'll talk to you in a minute. But let's talk to them about motivation and say, basically speaking, accurate and positive feedback will always produce improvement in the vast majority of young people that I've dealt with. Accurate and negative feedback can produce an improvement in some students. And those are the students who are highly driven and highly motivated as it is. And I think they're like the Johnny Sextons of this world, where they are they're detailed in terms of their effort and their application to the job in hand, and they will not allow anybody to get the better of them. So that's sort of a negative. But for the vast majority of people, students I've ever dealt with, it has always been, it has to be accurate, but it's got to be positive. In other words, we focus on what they can do and say, yes, that has worked very well. Let's try and get that from your 30 or 40 or 50 or 60%. Let's try and get that right up to the 90% plus. And that is possible. And that works extremely well. So just to show you that, to give you an idea that what is confronting students at the moment, the actual, in the higher grades, 95% of students get less than an H1 grade. Almost 90% get less, in these years here from 2021, almost 90% get less than H1 grades. So the vast majority of students are not hitting the top grades. And in the ordinary level, it's pretty similar. So the vast majority of students aren't getting the O1 grades, whether from 2017 or the last couple of years where there was grade inflation. But much more importantly, every year, 2/3 of students get less than 400 points, which means they live their lives on the 50s and 60s all the time. So that's not motivational in my books. What we have to do is to try to show them an avenue where they can actually get the H1s or the O1s. So here are the steps to do this. The first thing is that we need to have very strong feedback for students. And I happen to maintain that there's a lot of work being set by schools that is not necessarily, for 6 years at least, that's not necessarily appropriate. I maintain you're doing the Leaving Certificate. The only real learning or study that you need to do is focusing on the past questions of papers. So here's a step to try and get that H1 or O1. First of all, you would ask the student to select the best subject, the one they enjoy most. Don't worry about the other ones for the moment. Try and take the best subject that they enjoy. Particularly a good idea would be to say, well, what are you studying at the moment in class? If you're studying a particular topic, let's take that topic, because at least it's fresh in your mind. You know what's happening. You're in a position where you have some knowledge of what the topic is, and therefore you should be in a good place to be able to do a question. So you find a relevant question from the Leaving Certificate. You don't have to be set this. You can set this yourself. You can complete the question without time limits. It doesn't matter how long you take or how many books you have to try and do it, or notes or whatever you need to do. But let's get that question done and ask the teacher, is it a H1 or an O1? Is it the top mark? Now, the next part is critical, because if the teacher says, yeah, it's quite good, yeah, it's good, you need to do a bit more, that's not good enough. What we have to ask is, what exactly do I need to do to get this to an O1 or H1? Then the teacher will say, well, paragraph 1 is pretty good. You need a quote there. Paragraph 2 is fine. You got that one right. Paragraph 3, you're missing this and this statistic and that. And the teacher gives exact feedback for the question that the student has done. When that happens, the student redoes it and asks the teacher, is it now a H1 or an O1? And it should be, because the student's work, using notes and books and wherever else, plus the teacher's intervention, should produce that. I mean, the student by the student's own work has got to 60%. It's the teacher's job to get from 60 up to 90 plus, to help them to get up to 90 plus. So if when that happens and the teacher comes back and says, yes, it's a H1 or an O1, that's now a valuable document that you can use for study later on, because it's a perfect question, a perfect answer from the Leaving Certificate. And it doesn't take time to go through loads and loads of notes and things. It's simply a very, very good one to have. I've had students who have photographed their H1s and sent them to me, and they've papered their whole bedroom with H1s prior to the Leaving Certificate, because this process is highly motivational because they're getting there. Now, that's your best subject. You then move to the next best and the next best and the next best, because what this does is it shows the student how they study, it motivates them, and it helps them to get to a point where, yeah, look, I may not be as good in these subjects, but now I know how I study and how I get these marks, because every student that does the Leaving Certificate pretty much does it one time, and they don't know exactly what the marks have been given for. The teachers do. So that's an 8-step process to building the H1s. And you should have, and I'll come to it later on to show you how many you can actually get if you do this. And it's about, it takes about an hour and a half to do that, to do a full question. So on to strengths-based learning or education, SBA. There are 3 elements to it. It's quite simple. We need to identify the student's strengths. That's why we're looking to the best subjects they have. This is a guy called Marcus Buckingham, and you may know him. He's quite a famous guy. He's a motivation speaker, and it's business is really his area. But I've adapted his work in terms of the strengths-based concept for schools, for students.
Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Buckingham.
How many of you are parents? Okay, you're part of the problem. Gallup asked this question of parents. Your child comes home with the following grades: English, A; social studies, A; biology, C; algebra, F. Which grade deserves the most attention from you? The question doesn't say if you pick one grade, you must henceforth ignore all others. It just says, hey, look, as a parent, you've only got one thing to invest in your child: your time. Where will you spend most of it? 77% of American parents say the F. So the sad fact is that most conversations around most kitchen tables or dinner tables in this country are around the child's flaws and failings and how to fix them. Most children in this country are characterized by the people who love them the most, by who the child isn't, rather than who the child is. Now, you may listen to this and you may say, well, look, what can I do? The school system is set up to focus on the F. I can't let a kid fail a class. Now, first of all, I'd say that wasn't the question. The question just says where you spend most time. You can't ignore the F. And yes, you'd be right. The school systems in this country are set up to be remedial. But change is happening. There are some schools around this country that are deliberately and explicitly trying to become strengths-based, which means they're trying to help kids to identify what their strengths are and use them productively.
Hope you got that piece, Mark. Very good on the whole concept of trying to focus our attention on what students can do. The next thing I'm talking about is the environment. I'm very, very strong on the concept of environment. I always believe that when the environment is right for a student, they will work well. And sometimes that fit doesn't really work within certain schools. It may be too liberal, too strict, or get on with some of the teachers or the students or whatever. The environment is very important for comfortability. And I'd be very strong on the idea of ensuring that the environment in which they work is supportive. The next picture is about that, really, because this is a picture of Death Valley in California. And in this desert, the temperature gets over 50 degrees centigrade in the summertime, and nothing grows there. It is a barren place. You don't last long if you're there. But every about 10 or 12 years, this happens. And whatever seeds are buried in the ground, it rains for a very, very short time and everything blossoms. And I often think the students are like that they have these wonderful abilities deep within them, and it is our environment that we create for them that actually manage to bring it out. And sometimes that environment can inhibit the growth of potential for our students. So the next thing is about goal setting, and a lot of people talk about goal setting, but goal setting has got to be very carefully done. Because if a teacher says to a class, do question 7 for homework, I'd be quite upset with that, because I know that Mary is going to get that in 10 minutes and get a grade A or 100%, and Johnny maybe spend maybe an hour and maybe get maybe 20% on it. So in other words, when we set goals for students, we shouldn't be saying every do question 7 for homework. Mary should get questions 7, 8, 9, and 10, and Johnny should get question 7, part 2, section 3, subsection 2, and do that. Because once they can get to a point where they actually achieve a success, further success grows. But what we can do to students is we can consistently give them low marks for things that they're doing or subjects they're studying. And those low marks are demotivating. So we have to find mechanisms to assist students to get to the top mark, regardless of whether they cover the same amount of the course or not. So for instance, if I was to ask any of you now, how many of you actually have done the driving test? And did you get an A, B, or a C in it, or a D? Well, the answer is that you didn't. You all got A's. And the reason you all got A's is that if you got a D, they wouldn't let you on the road. In other words, it's not about comparing grades, it's about getting competency. And that's what this is all about. It's trying to get competency in small areas that build to bigger areas. I mean, can you imagine, an airline, one of the airline stewards coming out and saying, the pilot today is a D pilot, his takeoff's not great, but his landing's okay. The whole idea of having graded systems, in my mind, can degrade children. And there's a very, very famous book written by that many years ago about the idea of degrading society. So we must always set goals that are just out of reach. We need challenges. We always need challenges, but those goals need to be carefully set, but they should never be out of sight, because most students will say, not doing it. Now, just to give you something about efficiency, I talked some time ago there about doing questions from the paper and the idea of feedback, accurate feedback, and building that particular piece of work to a 1, either ordinary level or higher level, building that to that. So if you did 1 hour per question, let's say, approximately, and you did 1 hour of study per day, you would have 56 days remaining, which would give you 56 H1s or O1s, if you follow that system. Now, 56 H1s or O1s is not bad. That'll give you almost 10. Perfect questions for your best 6 subjects. And I'm just going to move the actual slide across a bit there so I can see it. Yeah. And then if you were to do 3 hours per day with 56 days remaining, and that would give you 168 H1s or O1s, which would produce 28 top class A1s or O1s or H1 work. So that's the efficiency aspect of it. The idea is that you don't do things that actually aren't designed specifically to try and get you to a point where you understand how the leaving certificate is going to work. Now, moving on to the next slide. Yeah, now the mock exams at the moment, I talked briefly about those. I mean, I wouldn't be too concerned about the mocks. Some schools don't even do them. My own daughter never did a mock, and she did quite well. So I don't get too worried about them. They start, they're normally in February thereabouts. Some schools differ, but the courses aren't finished. They're marked harder, and they're quite demotivating. What I would suggest is, and why they're important, is that it gives students the opportunity to see a paper in its entirety and time that particular paper, but they're all together. So it's quite an effort to do that. Anybody who's jogged around a marathon, doesn't run a marathon before that, you tend to build up to it. So I'm suggesting mini mocks. So why not on a weekend, close their books and see if you can answer a question within the time limits, 1 or 2 questions on a paper, and hand them in and go through the same process again. Or maybe you might be able to do one complete paper, but it's not designed to have this marathon session where you're out of school for 3 weeks waiting for marks to come back. And I think mini mocks on an ongoing basis are a far better way of getting students really familiar with the type of papers and the timing that's very important in an examination. So I'm going to tell you a story. I've got a number of case histories, but I'm going to tell you a story which describes the concept. And I've told this story many times before, so if you've heard it before, please bear with me. But it's a story about, it's a strengths-based story, and it's about one of my students called David, who came into first year, and he was, one of my criminals in first year. He was always in my office for something, always in trouble about something going on. And he was up to certain stuff. That's no doubt about that. But he never got more than about 150 points total if you sort of work the same formula right the way down to first year. And in sixth year, by the time he got to sixth year, nothing much had changed. So I'm seeing him in sixth year in night study, and he's highlighting every single line of his textbook. And I asked him what he was doing, and he said, "I'm studying for a test, sir." And I said, "Look, why don't you come and see me like many of your friends are doing? Come and see me, and I'll show you how to study properly." So fair play to him. He did. He walked up the long corridor to the headmaster's office. He didn't get lost. He knew his way very well. And when I took out his report on the computer, it's really hard to find anything of value in it. I mean, it was comments like, "Who is this student? Is he a member of the school?" But I did find one grade in old grades, grade D at higher level geography the previous year in fifth year. And I thought, okay, David, what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on your geography. And he looked at me as if he got about three heads, and he said to me, "But should I pass that?" And I said, no, trust me. So I worked with him, as did his geography teacher, as did his tutor. And in the space of 6 weeks, that D went to a C, the C went to a B, and the B went to an A. That's a true story. Now, it wasn't examined, it was assessments. It was, you can open his books and work on it at home, but it went up to an A. Now, you can imagine what happened with other subjects. Every one of his other subjects increased. And in the leaving certificate, which happened about 4 months later, he ended up with 365 points, which wasn't a world-beating record, but for him it was. And as he realized he was into UCD arts with his mates and his friends, he burst into tears and went around thanking everybody that had helped him. His mother was in floods of tears, his father even had the handkerchief out. But never before had they seen someone who they love very much be successful in an environment where he had never been successful. That is one of the best stories I can tell. I've got thousands of stories, and I certainly won't bore you with them tonight, but I've got many, many thousand stories that explain the whole concept of strengths-based education. So that, to my mind, is a brief overview. I'm just watching the time here because we're getting probably short on time. I am happy to take any questions, happy to listen to anything that you might want to ask. And of course, you've got my contact details there if you want to contact me on anything that you want. So any questions? So that's a brief overview, and I'm conscious of the time to keep it within the limits. Paul, over to you again.
Great, thanks very much indeed. Just one of the things that I'm just asking, Arthur, and as you know, I mean, I certainly would be. I'm not sure what I would gather. My sound is not good with broad. We have a ferocious storm in Carberry County there just at the moment, but there's focused on strength-based learning. One of the idiosyncrasies, I suppose you'd say, about the leaving certificate is you do have to do those 6 or 7 or 8 subjects, whatever they are. So from the point of view of when you approach, and I don't want to focus on the weaker subjects, but obviously you do have to try and manage them as well, or in some instances, I do know with my own children who have been through the leaving certificate, they kind of pretty well abandoned some subjects and focused on the ones that could get maximum points, because sadly we're points based to a certain extent in the system that we're in. So what would your comments be around those, for instance?
Yeah, that's the sad part about it. But having said that, if you start this with sufficient time, like even now, there is still time for to get to do well. I think if you work off the motivational aspect, once motivation kicks in, everything else will kick in. So I can't force students to work, but what I can do is I can show them how they can be successful in one area and they can transfer that to other areas. So you start with your best subject. You get your H1s in that. You learn how to get your H1s, your O1s. You learn what's required. You then go to your next best subject, and you go to your next best, and you see how far down that list you can go to. But you've learned how to get marks, because the examiners in it's a very formulaic system, and it helps. Your knowledge in one subject will transfer to another, and also how students learn how to study. But all the students I've ever dealt with over the years have improved their results based on this system.
And another thing, just to ask you in relation to kind of structuring study. Because obviously, as we progress through those, is it 59 days that you highlighted that we have? There will be times actually that are important for rest and relaxation, and from that perspective, to give your head, our heads, but more particularly our students' heads, a little bit of space. But have you any advice from the point of view of trying to formulate a study structure and how you approach that, or have that conversation with our kids, with our children, with our student children?
Every student is different. Quite simply, every student is different, and they study in different ways. But the one common thread to the whole lot is if they're motivated, they'll study. So I would not designate, as it were, time for your study now, wherever else, because sometimes these students study late at night, they study early mornings, they study at all different times. But if we can get the motivation going, it works. To give you an idea, students from around about March, April onwards begin to study around about 3 hours a day outside school time on weekdays, and maybe 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday, and same on Sunday. That's the type of level of work that is needed if they want to get over 500 points. But that doesn't mean that everybody who did those hours got over 500 points. But it is sort of a benchmark of what you should be aiming for. I would not prescribe study times for students, because in a few short months they'll be in third level, or they'll be in work, or there'll be something where people won't be telling them what to do all the time. So I'm loath to give sort of times to study and structure. Some students like it. They do that themselves. They say, I study best this time, and I'm going to set myself some time to do it. But it's the motivation that will work that, rather than us telling them when they need to study.
So it is a question of working with them, obviously. So when they're ready to study, I mean, of course, sometimes they need a little bit of, not pressure, but a little bit of encouragement. But I suppose to study when their mind is not in that mode is probably going to achieve nothing.
It doesn't work, and then it just stresses everybody out, and then voices are raised, and all this sort of stuff, frustrations hit in. The whole idea is that if you work consistently on trying to get the manufacturing, the O1s or the H1s, if you consistently try to get those, you will be quite surprised how often a student will want to do more, because it's the same as it's like if you're hitting a golf shot down the middle, and you hit it straight down 250 meters down the middle, that keeps you going for the next 17 golf holes. It's once you start getting the H1s or the O1s, it really has an effect on the rest of your motivation to try and do the same in other areas or other topics or subjects. It works all the time once you get to that one, as it were, in the new grading system.
And that kind of links a little bit into another question that's come up there, Arthur, just in relation to looking for individual teachers' feedback on kind of individual questions and stuff like that. How realistic or how feasible is that, you feel?
I think first of all, every teacher I've ever known, with very few exceptions, when a student says to them, look, I've done this question from the paper, we're doing this topic in class, and I've just done that, would you ever have a look at it and see if you can do it? I don't know of any teacher that I can call who says, no, I'm not going to do that. Especially when a student of their own volition actually decides to do some work and to produce some work for a teacher not for teacher for himself, but in that class, the teacher really should, if you do come across teachers that do nothing on that one there, I think, you need to try and find another avenue to get that particular feedback. But I think there's no reason why they wouldn't do it, because especially in sixth year. I mean, I understand if every student they're teaching from first year to sixth year starts giving them work, and then they become overwhelmed by it. And to just give you an example, when I was back as a teacher many years ago, I didn't set any homework for my fifth and sixth years, and I said, "But I'll correct anything you give me." And I can tell you, I've never corrected more work. Because it was under their agenda that they were sending me stuff, and I was correcting it. So I think that's 6 years are a particularly different group. They're about to go into adulthood in the real sense of it, where they're going to go to work, or study, or further university or whatever, and we need to be conscious of that.
Yeah, I think it's worth actually saying, and some of the other webinars and some of the other presentations that we have focus very much on university and college not being the only route to future life or future career. There, of course, are a lot of different routes that you can go, and identifying those is important. There's a comment in as well, just in relation that some students work very hard and never actually achieve a H1. But I think your philosophy would be that to get them to achieve the best that they can, but through motivation to raise their standards in the subjects, first of all, that they wish to, and that's a knock-on effect to the other subjects.
Yeah, I actually, I have worked with students individually, as have members of my team, worked with students to hold their hand on this one, because students need a bit of hand-holding sometimes. Whilst that's the system, that's the methodology that I employ, but it is actually something that they need somebody to hold their hand, not to be looking over their shoulder. You need to be really conscious of trying to find something that's actually worked well, and then you accurately praise that work that's been done well. But you've got to be really accurate, and it's got to be praise that actually matters for a particular part. So if they do one question well on a paper, it shows them that they can actually get the top mark, the 90% plus. And that's what you focus on. Focus on that and say, look, you've done this, you can do this. Now, that means that the rest are probably possible too, just means a bit more work, and you'll get there. So that's the concept of constantly trying to look for the positive, look for the accurate positive feedback is really important.
I guess the most important thing, as you say, at this stage, is that we're supportive and encouraging to our student children, and therefore the focusing on what they can achieve and building on that is ultimately what is going to inspire them to achieve and do the best that they can.
I just picked up a question there, which I wonder just to address if I can. Just a quick one.
Yeah.
There it said, look, some students work really hard and never get a H1. Now let me just explain. Getting the H1s, the O1s, initially on the assessment based with the feedback with the teachers, you can get it. But when the exam comes, they may not get it, but they will have improved their performance quite considerably, because they've learned so much about how to get it. They may not get it in the end for lots of reasons, but they will certainly improve their performance, and they'll improve their performance by doing the process. I'm not saying they're all going to get H1s in the exam, or O1s. They won't, but they will definitely improve their results, and that's what we're about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's the key of it. And I think the other thing about strength-based learning is that it actually helps to identify the areas of interest in the first place, which actually, when you move that into a lot of the conversations that are going on around senior cycle and reform that needs to happen, which is fed through from third level comment and from business comment and the requirement of our education system, actually understanding what the student's strength is, best positions them to develop within those areas to actually benefit themselves and others into the future. So it would be very much of the same mind as yourselves, and in Godsil education, it's certainly something that the system is recognizing more and more, I think, and hopefully those changes come sooner rather than later.
Okay, there's another question here, which if you don't mind, I might address, Paul, if that's okay with you.
No, absolutely. Do work too, please. Yeah.
There's a question here which says, how do you support kids that work fine at home in school but panic in exams? Now, what I have found, yeah, it's a good question. What I've found is that when you start building their self-esteem in terms of their ability to get there, they may work well in school, but they must get the ones, not for an examination, but through an assessment with their teachers, working together to try and get up to the top mark or 90% plus. Once they get that, they build confidence that they can do it. And I have found that their exam stress is lessened. It may not go away completely because there may be other reasons for exam stress, which are outside my expertise. But they will definitely reduce their stress levels when they see that they're capable of doing it, because they're proving to themselves that they actually can get these good marks. But it's a good question, and there's a number of I suppose variables in kids who panic in exams. One of which is confidence, and this process builds confidence.
Yeah, I actually just extending on from that, Arthur, just to get your own views on it as well. One of the things that has mentioned before in relation to immediate preparation, the day before, the night before education. From that perspective, many people, there is often a comment, well, you're not going to learn an awful lot between today and tomorrow. No. Actually, what you need to do is make sure that your brain is clear so that everything you do actually know, you can get down on the paper, rather than being worried about the stuff you don't know. Okay. Kind of maybe a microcosm of the broader points that you're making about learning your strength.
That's very important too. I mean, it's very hard to tell a student, have a good night's sleep now, before the first examination. It's not the easiest thing to do. You can tell them, but the chances of it, over some anyway, they won't sleep that well. But the idea, what you see, if you build up all these numbers of H1s or O1s, you've got them in front of you. They're single documents, and so you can certainly review those, because that's not like going through textbooks and notes and all of this stuff. You're actually just taking the all your top class answers, and you're skimming them the day before. You're not going crazy trying to. You can actually take notes from them if you want, rather than taking notes from a book, which you can spend hours taking notes from a book. And people write books because they want to make money, and they put lots of nice pictures in, and they put lots of stuff in it. But actually, the exam itself only wants one little piece out of each paragraph. So this is, by the way, sorry, I should have prefaced all my remarks by saying this is not education. This is how to get through a rather weak assessment system called the Leaving Certificate. This is not education. Okay, so I should have said that in the very beginning. It's just a system that has worked very well. I'm very happy to take any questions or any emails, and they want to help people out.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, listen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Arthur. Very much appreciated, very informative, and I think very inspirational. A lot of comment coming in to say how valuable people feel that was. And I do think, of course, I would, in my own business life, and I'm sure in anybody else's business life, there is no shadow of doubt that when you're doing things you enjoy, you do them better. And you get the best out of people when they're doing stuff that they enjoy, and when they are able to produce, and you acknowledge that. So I think that the same parameters apply within this. So much appreciated, Arthur. Thank you very much indeed.
One last thing, Paul, before you go. I just saw a little note there. This comes here, says Arthur for Minister for Education. If that has anything to do with any influence, please contact me. I'd be quite happy to do that.
I think for certainly there are many real changes required. As you mentioned, Leaving Certificate has been found and by the vast majority of people to be not fit for purpose. Required change, which unfortunately is quite slow, but it is in process, and there's significant conversation going on about that. And I'm happy to say that NPCPP are in there. I know that you're engaged as well in these matters. So it's important that we all learn from our experiences and listen to what's said. And I think it's been stated that the Leaving Certificate has not changed in decades. And as you pointed out earlier on in your presentation, just look at the phone box and the mobile phone and see how much the world has changed. Exactly. And we definitely need to change that. absolutely reason, as I said at the start of this, why NPCPP and parents' voice needs to be heard and clear in those discussions as well. So thank you, Arthur, again. NPCPP very happy to bring information and support through our Wednesday webinars and every other avenue that parents want to seek through that, whether it's through the website, through email, our social media, etc. We try to keep people informed and be there. Important that all parents are involved and help to express their viewpoints as well. But for this one, as I said, very big interest. We will be running it again. Thank you for the permission to record it, Arthur, and to use it again. Thank you very, very much indeed for your inspirational words tonight. And with that, we'll say cheerio to everybody. Thanks for attending. Let others know who maybe didn't see it, and we can show it to them next Wednesday or in future webinars. Keep an eye on NPCPP social media, and you'll see when they're coming. Thanks, Arthur. Talk to you again soon.
Cheers, guys. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Cheers, folks.